The Commonwealth has accused Karen Read of striking her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her car after a night of drinking and leaving him in the snow to die. The defense is saying, as they said in their opening statement, that Karen Read was framed and this is all a cover-up. We are at the lunch break of day 29 of the Commonwealth versus Karen Read from a mobile stream day for me. And we finished with the prosecution's case in chief. Hold on, let's see if I can get it right again. Right? The Commonwealth has rested after the medical examiner, which we anticipated, and the defense has now called the snowplow operator and Dr. Russell. And after lunch, we will be getting into the defense's third expert, who will be their tech expert, and that will close out the day today. So interesting enough, from the medical examiner for the Commonwealth today, the testimony that blew my mind was that the medical examiner doesn't necessarily think that the injuries to John O'Keefe are consistent with a motor vehicle collision. They are not the classic indicia of a motor vehicle collision that you would see. And the Commonwealth's medical examiner really said there is a wide variety of possibilities for what those injuries could come from, but that they didn't match up, in her opinion, with a motor vehicle accident. So she said this is a blunt force injury to the back of the head. She said with manner and mechanism, again, I can't really testify to that. You would need like a biomechanical engineer, but that it is consistent with a fall and a hit to the back of the head, or a fall or a hit to the back of the head. So when there was cross-examination of the medical examiner, she said the injuries on his face could be consistent with a fight, could be consistent with an altercation, could be consistent with a fall. The thing is, when even the cause of death could be consistent with this or this or this or this, how does a jury determine that John O'Keefe was killed by being hit by a vehicle? He was killed by the injury to the back of his head and hypothermia. But how did he get the injury to the back of his head? And there isn't a ton of evidence pointing to the fact that it was a vehicle. Could there be a lot of scenarios? Yes. Do any of those scenarios matter at this point? No. What matters is, did it come from Karen Read? And if the jury can't get to that answer, then I don't know how they get to a verdict on any of it, because all three of the causes of action, all three of the charges here are centered around Karen Read hitting John O'Keefe with the car. Second degree injury means she meant to do it and did it, like just did the thing. Then the operating under the influence and did it. Driving drunk, did the thing. And then the hit and run, did the thing, know you did the thing, and left. But as the defense very well pointed out during their argument for a motion for directed verdict, Alan Jackson said, look, Your Honor, all of these causes of action center around, did Karen Read hit John O'Keefe with the car? And his argument was, no reasonable jury can come to that conclusion based on the evidence presented by the Commonwealth, even when taken in light most favorable to the Commonwealth. Lally got up and started to argue, Your Honor, surprisingly, I disagree with the defense, sort of, and then got cut off immediately by the court and said, surprisingly, we don't just get to the arguments. We are seeing the court cut off Lally quite a bit more today than we have. A lot more objections sustained against him in cross-examination, and her rulings seem to be fairly consistent with her rulings during the Commonwealth's case in chief, now that we are in the defense's case in chief. What an interesting morning. I did not expect the Commonwealth's medical examiner to have such strong opinions with regard to the motor vehicle accident, given that the Commonwealth chose to bring this case knowing what the medical examiner's opinions were. So again, how are we here? And when Lally argued against the motion for directed verdict, he pointed out what I think we're going to see in his closing argument. Your Honor, it's not just the accident reconstructionist. It's the one shoe. It's the debris near the victim. He said it's the microscopic pieces of taillight in the victim's clothing. It's the broken taillight. It's the defendant's statement saying, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. It is all of these things together, and that totality leans to John O'Keefe being hit by Karen Read. We will see at the end of this case if the jury agrees and if the end of these witnesses, the jury agrees. But we just finished with Dr. Russell, who said the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm are consistent with a animal attack, specifically a large dog. At the end of trial day 29, the court is very confident that the jurors are going to get this case to deliberate next week. I think the defense probably only has 2, if maybe 3 more witnesses, because what we've seen today is Dr. Russell, who testified about the injuries on John O'Keefe's arm. We saw the driver of the snowplow who saw a Ford Focus parked outside of 34 Fairview, and it caught their attention because it was odd as plows were out and there shouldn't be a car on the side of the road, but they didn't call it in because they were giving deference and consideration to the Alberts. And then we heard from the defense tech expert. I was actually surprised that we didn't get into the weeds more. I thought that we would. I think I'm kind of glad about that. I don't know. I'll let you know my feelings next week, but I think I'm glad they didn't get too much into John O'Keefe's location. They did get into what steps meant and going the 3 flights of stairs meant. And they talked a lot about the difference in time from those internal clocks that, again, we heard the Commonwealth's experts talk about, whether there was a 3-minute offset between those clocks. And for this expert's point, it was, this has to be considered, right? This expert is not trying to nail down things with certainty unless it's placing John O'Keefe clearly where the Commonwealth says he is, which he did not do. But this expert's purpose is to say, we have to consider these possibilities, right? Raise the possibilities, raise the doubt of, we can't rely on it being exactly what they said, because the Commonwealth has said this data is really reliable. John O'Keefe's exactly here, but also it's also showing him in the car. So is there any solid information within that? Is he a half a mile away? Is the phone going up and downstairs? Is the step data reliable? And there again is doubt. The jury will get to decide what witnesses they believe. If they decide that one of the cell experts makes more sense, then that's what they'll do. If they find that this expert makes them more sense, that's what they'll do. But I don't know if the jury's going to start their considerations around the house long to die in the snow Google search, or if they're going to start their deliberations with the coroner's testimony. And as we ended with that testimony this morning, the coroner said that they couldn't relate back to these injuries being consistent with what they've seen in vehicle collisions with pedestrian. And I wonder if that's going to be the sticking point for the jury more than any of the rest of this. The jury doesn't have to decide if the defense's theory is accurate. They have to decide if the Commonwealth proved their case. That is the focus and the question. It is the defense's job to raise doubts and questions. And I think throughout today, they've some done that, but the more they go into Jen McCabe, the more I see it in the chat. And I even see it for myself that I'm like, do we have to talk about Jen McCabe anymore? Because can you please tell me how John O'Keefe got hit with this car? Because I still don't understand. Can you just make that clear for me? Because it's still not clear. And at the end of the state's case, that should be clear. How did John O'Keefe get hit by Karen Read's car? How did that happen? And I don't think that that question has been well answered. Do you? So that head injury, the coroner testified, could be a fall, could be a punch. The coroner testified, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And that's why the coroner's report came back undetermined, because the coroner couldn't say to reasonable certainty. We will see what happens next week. On Monday, I believe we'll be getting into the 2 biomechanical experts. That will be quite interesting. The court also denied the motion for directed verdict. I wasn't surprised by that. I don't know if anybody was surprised by that. Maybe some were. Those are very rarely granted. In this case, is going to go to the jury next week. I'm excited for it. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.